Trafficking in human beings is still ongoing at a large scale. We identify each year around 7,000 victims, but I should say it's only the tip of the iceberg. It's much bigger than that. The victims of trafficking are mainly women. There is a huge majority of women. We have around 1/4, 23% of the victims are children. Victims of trafficking are mainly trafficked for sexual purposes, but we have also seen that trafficking for labor exploitation has gone up. This is really an EU problem. The majority of the victims are EU citizens. And when we look upon the children, we can see that a huge majority of the trafficked children are EU citizens. The victims of trafficking, more than 1/3 are being trafficked in their own country. So it's not necessary to also go across border to be a victim of trafficking. Why is this such a terrible crime? It's very profitable because if you traffic drugs or firearms, you can only sell it once. But if you traffic a woman, a girl, for sexual purposes, you can sell her body again and again and again and again. We saw actually one of those criminals that were arrested. We saw a case where women were trafficked from one EU member state to another, and they were tattooed to actually show who actually so-called owns these victims. So it's absolutely necessary to work hard to fight trafficking human beings. That's why I presented a strategy on combating trafficking human beings already spring last year. And we are now working on implementing this strategy. What we also announced there was that we should evaluate our existing directive, and we have done so. And today we also present a progress report and also the evaluation. And we can see that the directive we have is a good one. It really works. But we also need to do some targeted amendments to make it even stronger. And this is what I will present today. I can also say that we have seen that the numbers of suspect criminals have gone up the last years, but the numbers of convicted persons have not gone up very much. So still there is a huge problem with impunity. In the amended directive that I present today, we propose to add two more things to be added into the definition of trafficking. We'll add forced marriage, which has got to go up, and also illegal adoptions. Both these two should be covered. So far it's been voluntary for member states to include these other parts of trafficking, but very few member states, if any, have done so. So that's why we propose it to be covered in the directive in this new one. We also stress specifically what we've seen the last year, that trafficking goes online increasingly, and this we also take into account in our amendments. We also propose mandatory sanctions against companies responsible for trafficking offences. This has also been voluntary for member states, but very few have actually done much to impose that. Now we make it mandatory in the directive. We also stress the support of victims with the formal establishment of national referral mechanism. And why is this so important? Of course, we need to help these victims of trafficking, but very often they are afraid. that they will be re-victimized or that they will be punished in one way or another. So it's extremely important that we have a proper system in place also for those that have been victims in different member states. So that's why we propose this amendment in the directive. The last thing I would like to mention is that we also make it mandatory to criminalize the use of services obtained from victims of trafficking when the user knows that the person is a victim. So far, a number of member states have already criminalized this, but not all of them. And why is this important? It's because today it's mandatory to criminalize employment of victims of trafficking. But if you buy a woman's body for sexual purposes, or if you just buy some services from a construction worker at your home, for example, maybe the person is not employed, but you use the services of a victim of trafficking, and this should be equally criminalized. Can I also use this opportunity to thank Diane Smith, who is our anti-trafficking coordinator, and she has really been raising to the challenge this year. Because you all know that we received almost 13 million Ukrainians crossing the border into the European Union, 90% of them women and children. We so far today have around 4 million Ukrainian refugees staying in our member states. And of course, we realized very early that so many women and children that are coming in a vulnerable situation into the European Union, there is a huge risk that among all these heartwarming citizens that stand up to support all these refugees, there could also be criminals that try to sneak in to take advantage of the situation and use vulnerable women and children for trafficking purposes. And that's why I'm very glad that Diane Smith really showed her strength and raised to this challenge. And I would like to invite you to tell a little bit more on what we have been doing to deal with the huge risk of trafficking of Ukrainian refugees.